Hi, everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of VOX VOMITUS. I am your host, Jennifer Ann Gordon, the author of the award-winning novel Beautiful, Frightening, and Silent, as well as the Hotel series and the upcoming book Pretty Ugly. With me today, as always, is my VOX VOMITUS vixen, Allison Martine, author of the Bourbon books.
Cheers.
With us today, we have a very special guest. It is Mary Dixie Carter, author of The Photographer. Welcome, Mary Dixie. Thank you so much for being here.
Cheers.
We're toasting.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Mary's got a cup of wine, and that is the classiest thing that has ever happened on our show.
I think it is. I like it. Is it like a styrofoam cup? It's
a paper cup, just a regular paper cup, a standard paper cup. But
of wine.
It's the best I can do at the moment. So
I love it.
I love it. I like that you put in the effort to get wine.
I did put in the effort. I was like, well,
you're like, what? I can drink?
Yeah. And then I was a little nervous about the idea of having a drink and losing my coherence and my ability to speak clearly.
This is why we do it. We have
that problem every week.
That is true. Because Allison and I are drinking bourbon. So by like 3/4 of the way through the interview, we're like, tell us what it was like. Have you ever been on the set of Designing Women?
That was going to be our opening question anyway, and I threatened to hum the theme song. So,
so our viewers, Mary Dixie comes from Hollywood royalty. Your mother is Dixie Carter, and your father is Hal Holbrook, or is he your stepfather?
My stepfather, yes.
Okay.
My stepfather is Hal Holbrook. Yes.
Oh my gosh.
They're both amazing people, as well as being extremely talented. And my mom passed away 11 years ago, and my stepfather just passed away this year. But he had a long and magnificent career and was really working into his 90s.
That's just crazy and amazing, and I love that.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy? He was touring his one-man show, Mark Twain Tonight, well past his 90th birthday, and only really retired when he was, I don't know if he was 91 or 92 when he retired.
That is incredible.
And just incredible, yeah. And I think, it kept him like he had to do it. And it sort of like kept him healthy and kept him moving, because so it was like a relationship between working and living. It was who he was.
Yeah. So do you have a performance background, don't you?
I do. Yes. So I started out as an actress.
Did I.
Did you?
Yes.
Well, I feel like acting and writing are extremely close. I mean, they're just, two peas in a pod. The same skills or muscles or whatever. I feel so similar.
I say that all the time. I'm like, when I developed characters for the stage, it's the same way I develop characters for a book. Like,
totally.
Same way.
Exactly. Yes. Oh, I'm so glad to share that with you, because it's exactly the same way I think about it. And like, how would this person move? And like, and also trying to picture the bedroom when they were 5 years old. Like you would do that if you were performing the role.
Yes.
You would also do it, if you're writing about the person.
So do you act out when you're writing? Like, do you do the voices and everything? Did you play your Delta Dawn in The Photographer?
I actually did the audiobook.
Did you really?
Yes, I did the audiobook. So I got to narrate the whole thing, which was such a joy. It was so much fun.
Now I'm having total FOMO because I read the book, and I was telling Jen earlier, I prefer to have audio just because it's just easier for me to do things. But if I would have known I got to hear you do it, then I'm having like triple. Why didn't I get the audiobook to get to hear all that?
Oh, well, maybe you'll just have to do the whole thing again.
I think I'm going to need to. Well, and I was telling Jen, this is such a hard book for me to talk about because I love it so much. and I don't want to say anything that's going to give anything away. So how do you talk about it? Well, it was a good book. Go read it. And then that's it. Okay,
I know. I just keep saying,
like, do it that way.
It's a character that is like weaseled its way into my head, and I keep thinking about her. And I think that's what she would want anyways, and what you want.
She would.
So
she's still up there.
Do you have a way of describing the photographer so it doesn't give any of the magic away, but still makes it seem magical?
Well, so yes, I can tell you how I would describe it, and then you'll see it may not give the full gist of it, but I'd say, okay, Delta Dawn is the photographer. She takes pictures of wealthy New Yorkers and their children. And at the opening of the book, she goes to the home of Amelia and Fritz Straub to photograph their daughter's 11th birthday party. And she falls in love with the family. She becomes obsessed with this family. And the book is the story of her trying to insinuate herself into the family. And also, I
see your eyes have gotten very wide at this point. You're like, oh, I'm on slippery slope right now. To like,
So if I tell you how I got the idea for the book,
yes,
then it does reveal a lot about the nature of the book, I think. Well, I hired a photographer myself to take pictures of my two children, who are now 11 and 8, but this was a while back. And the pictures came back and they were beautiful, but the children's eyes were cobalt blue, and they're not in real life.
Oh my gosh.
I said to the photographer, I would like for my children's eyes to be their real color. And she said, there is no real color. And I was so struck by that sentence, that there is no real color. And it stayed in my head, that psychology and that point of view on the world. So whether we're talking about photos or whether we're talking about anything, that you just choose to make it what you want it to be, and then that's what's real. And you sort of disregard the way it was in the first place. Like, it was really irrelevant what color my children's eyes were.
And for the record, what color are your children's eyes?
So they're like grayish. I would say, they're maybe close to my eye color, which is like hazel.
Jen's trying to Jen doesn't have her glasses on. Good luck there.
I know. So that's why I'm like, I'll just creepy get close to my camera so I can see your eyes.
Lighting situation is disappointing, and part of it is the fact that I'm in the hotel room. But so I'm apologize that maybe you can't see my eye color as well as you could.
You look great, but eye color is hard to tell on camera anyway, because sometimes the light does change it. But I was trying to figure out whether cobalt was just a permutation, or no, they've got black, blue, gray, green, purple eyes, and we just
have like hazel, so like grayish green, but not a bright color. I would say not a bright color, a kind of muted color, the same way my eyes are sort of a muted color, and their eyes in the photos were cobalt blue. So
like alien eyes,
yes,
is what I'm picturing.
Well, and I'm laughing because there was a thing for a while on Twitter where all the authors were changing their avatars to have like cyborg blue eyes where they lit up. So now that's what I'm picturing that this photographer's done to your children. They have been possessed by aliens. Aren't these nice photos?
So I love the fact that you said, can you change their eye color to be the correct eye color? And she said there is no color. Did she ever go back and change it?
So she
or
did
do you
change
have
it,
okay.
But she didn't change it all the way to the real color. She did not change it all the way back, but she did change it some, and so it was maybe a compromise or something. But,
her artistic vision and the truth of your children's reality.
Of your children. This is her vision.
So that's Delta Dawn is this. No, I'm not suggesting that Delta Dawn is based upon this photographer, because
we'd have a slander and libel suit on our hands if you did. But go on.
I'm not suggesting that at all. But she has that point of view on the world, that there is no real whatever. And she changes the photos to suit her vision, and she changes the world. I mean, she changes her own life and her place in the world in order to suit her vision of what she wants it to be and what she thinks it should be. And so, you know, she kind of finds her way into this family and inserting herself and manipulating everyone a little bit. And then just a little bit. And they don't know what's hit them. But I will say that I don't intend, or I hope readers don't take Delta Dawn to be like the villain, because I think she's, I hope that people have compassion for her and her feeling like an outsider and desperate to belong to something and desperate to be part of this glamorous world and this educated, fancy, everything she thinks she wishes she was and she believes she is not. Because, yeah.
And
I think, sorry. Okay.
I was going to say there were lines, and I was sending them to Jen earlier when I was reading them, that just absolutely broke my heart. Things where you didn't outright come and say certain things, but you implied them. I won't say more, but it involved monkey bars.
Yes, that was the part I was just about to bring up without saying. I think I was going to say
monkey bars, because it's not a spoiler. No one will have any idea if they haven't read it what I'm talking about with monkey bars. But when
what
they
an
read
incredible character insight, and I think that goes back to that like acting thing where you just take these like little core memories of their youth and just sprinkle it in, and it tells such a huge story in so few lines.
Oh, good. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you saw it that way.
It floored us. And then there was another line, which again is not a spoiler, something like she didn't understand happiness because she never felt it in a visceral level.
No, there was something like that. And then it was the line about what hobbies were, like what the point of having a hobby even would be.
Yeah.
Like, that was some concept she just couldn't wrap her mind around.
Like fun or something like
that. Yeah, like she didn't understand the concept of fun.
Of like doing something just for fun. That this wasn't who she had ever been allowed to be, had the freedom to be.
Yes, totally. I mean, that sort of sums her up, really.
And this is probably going to make me sound crazy, but I texted that line to Allison and I said, I feel like she just spoke my truth.
Yeah.
That was like the day I was having. I'm like, I don't even understand what fun is. And then I read that line and I was just like, oh my God. I felt
like that at times. Like, you know, when you're in a bad place, you, like, people around you can be having fun and you're like, why? What?
Like, what is that you're doing? Why are you making those sounds with your mouth? That's called laughing. Oh, that's weird.
Well, and I was going to say, I can totally see why you would approach a book from that same position of being an actor, because this was such a character-driven book, which is the kind of book that I gravitate towards. So I kind of fall out of any specific genre, and it's really more about I fall for character-driven stories, which yours absolutely was. And then I couldn't figure out what to hashtag it as, because there's no character-driven stories hashtag. But would you call it a psychological thriller or a domestic drama, or where do we find you in Barnes and Noble? That's
what shelf is this on?
It is
hopefully bestsellers.
Hopefully, yes. It's doing. I mean, there's a lot of exciting things. Like People magazine called it one of the must reads for the summer, and
it
is. Called it like 5 books not to miss or something like that. And the New York Times gave it a great review. So a lot of exciting things happening. But in Barnes and Noble, it would be like it is the mystery and thriller section often where one might find it. And the thriller category, I'm happy with it. I didn't actually set out to write a thriller. I just was writing this, and then everyone else told me it was a thriller.
That happens sometimes with genre, where it's like I wrote the story and then everybody else tries to figure out where it sits most easily, because there is so much intensity in your story that I wouldn't know where else to put it other than something like thriller, because you associate thriller with intense stories like that. And there isn't something, no spoiler, there's no like aliens other than her children's cobalt eyes. So it wouldn't fit in, say, science fiction or fantasy, but it has that momentum that a lot of other stories that are just straight fiction just don't have.
Yeah.
One thing I was trying to figure out why why I wrote something that was categorized as a thriller. And I have one theory, and it may not be accurate, but because I did a lot of theater and I did a lot of plays, and plays are, shorter than novels. And so you really need to get the ball rolling quickly and escalate the tension quickly in a play. And I've read so many plays. So I wonder if my desire to escalate the tension quickly and like ramp it up was what pushed this in the direction of thriller.
I can see that. I can see that. I mean, I know when I write, I think because, again, I've done so many plays and I've been in so many plays and I've read so many plays and done so many scenes that I feel like I write books that have very small casts because I always think of it as just like, oh, it's a 3-person show. It's like, it'll be easily adapted for the stage.
It'll fit in a black box. You're good.
It can be in a black box theater.
Yeah.
So, and then sometimes I read these like epic fantasy novels and I'm just like, this book has like 804 characters. Mm-hmm. How would that fit on a stage?
It wouldn't. No, it ends up on HBO, and that's also valid, but it's not what you do. And that's fine.
So at what point during your writing process did you know Delta Dawn's name was going to be Delta Dawn? Because I didn't know if she gave that name to herself or if her parents gave her that name. I don't know if it's important.
We were arguing about this because I didn't know it was a real song. I thought it was an homage to Designing Women, and there's like some stab at Delta Burke in there. Like, no? Okay, just checking.
It's a real so
it's a great song.
Delta Dawn's name was not originally Delta Dawn, but I always knew that I didn't have the right name. So originally, if you must know, her name was Zoe.
Oh. Yeah, that's not the right name.
No, and I like the name Zoe, but it doesn't really fit that character.
No, it doesn't. And so at some point it was always kind of clear to me, but I was still struggling with what her name was. Now, Delta Dawn, the lyrics to Delta Dawn really do connect in my mind in some sort of emotional way with this character.
Yes. Sorry.
And so that was one thing. And then the other thing is her name. So my name, as you've probably noticed, is a very Southern name.
Yes.
A double name, which is unusual if you live in Brooklyn or if you live, on either East or West Coast, which I have most of my life. So it's noteworthy. And people are like, people take note, and it sort of makes me slightly different. Yeah. I think that I had a desire to make Delta Dawn slightly different in many ways, and just one of those is her name and marking her kind of as an outsider, so she feels on a very deep level that she's an outsider, and that is one more thing that keeps her in that category.
Well, and I don't want to spoil too much about the background that we do get from her, but you do paint a very vivid picture of what her childhood was like, and it's very distinctive. And just to say, it's out of Florida, so that name all kind of fits together. That you can see a Delta Dawn leaving Florida and trying to become someone else. And it's interesting that she doesn't change her name. And then I know Jen was asking, was that her name at birth, or was that a name she took on herself?
So it was her name at birth. Her mother was a fan of the song, and her mother gave her the name, and their last name happened to be Dawn. just, their last name was already Dawn, and her mother named her Delta. So
see, now I'm feeling like there's a missed opportunity because my daughter's middle name is Dawn, named after my mother, who was Dawn, and I could have named her Delta. I think I probably called
give
a
her a
bullet there.
nickname.
It will not. She'll be like, "Why are you calling me Delta?" All of a sudden.
When
Anyway,
I meet her, I could be her crazy Aunt Jennifer, and who calls her Delta.
She's like, why is mommy's friend from the computer calling me weird names?
Mommy's friend from the computer. So I'm a Jennifer Ann. Like my birth certificate is at Jennifer Ann, and my mother's from Florida. So I understand the two name thing. I was very close to becoming a Kelly Ann or a Melody Ann or a Mary Ann.
Then you'd be on Gilligan's Island.
I know. And my dad said those were the names of daytime strippers. So they changed it to Jennifer Ann. And I was just like, that was the story they told me of how I was named.
You were also born in the decade of Jennifers. So
exactly. I was like, really? You went from Mary Ann to just, I don't know, just Jennifer. Jennifer's fine.
But not a stripper.
Does anyone call you Jennifer Ann, the whole thing? Do people say Jennifer Ann?
Only when I was in trouble when I was a kid. But I go by Jennifer Ann as a writer.
Right, I see.
Because I'm just like reclaiming it. Because I don't know why. Because I needed more letters in my name.
My mom really insisted on keeping the Dixie in there. Like if someone called me Mary, she was not pleased by it. She was like, it's no, it's Mary Dixie. You have to say Mary Dixie. And I guess I heard that so many times that I sort of like, took it on myself, like, no, you have to say Mary Dixie. And it's an interesting question of like, why doesn't Delta Dawn change her name? But I think that there's a part of her that feels very like she's still kind of is that identity. And so it's hard for her to completely divorce. She does want to leave it behind, but she also is clinging to part of it. Yeah. And so, And then like, so there were times when I thought, well, why don't I just call myself Mary and drop the Dixie? Because it is, it's like an extra hurdle for someone who lives in New York City to be Mary Dixie. It's like everyone is like, oh, what?
You're never getting your coffee at Starbucks. Just give up.
Yeah. So I will say your amazing publicist, Kim, messaged us and she was just like, it's Mary Dixie. Just so you know, it's Mary Dixie. I was like, okay, it's Mary Dixie. It's Mary Dixie. It's Mary Dixie. I messaged Allison. I'm like, it's Mary Dixie. And she was like, okay, we can do this. It's like Sarah Michelle Gellar or Sarah Jessica Parker. We can do it. We can do this. I'm like, I can do this. I'm a Jennifer Ann. I should know how to do this.
Well, if someone calls me Mary, I don't take it personally at all because I'm so used to it. Like I'm just like, well, everyone assumes that it's Mary and that Dixie maybe even part of my last name. If
we weren't sure.
And we were like, is it hyphenated here? Is it not hyphenated anywhere? Is it spaced out?
It's like if we don't see how you filled out the bubbles on your SAT, we wouldn't know where the letters are going to go.
Very confusing. It's like, there's no middle name. There's just no middle name.
So you just didn't get one.
Dixie is in the first name box on the SAT.
Yeah, like my birth certificate, it's like Jennifer Ann. And then Gordon's over there, and there's no
nothing in the middle name column. Yeah. That's the same with me.
So that's when I realized, I'm like, oh, I think that's my first name, even though nobody calls me that, or somebody just messed up the birth certificate.
Also possible.
But people were still smoking in the hospitals back then.
It is true. Well, and I was also going to say that when you have a name that is like the Dixie Carter part has this history to it and this beloved person, that's something I wouldn't want to lose that. I wouldn't want that left off either. So I love that. I mean, I go by two different author names, and Allison Martine, the Martine was my grandmother's middle name, which I'm grateful for because it's better than Editha, which was, I guess, the other choice if I had been named from her first name. But I like having that kind of family history right there in my name.
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I don't go by Allison Martine as a first name because it's part of my full name. It's my middle name, but I love that. Hey, it's right there. The Mary Dixie Carter is a living homage to your mom, and I love that.
It is. Yes, it is. And I mean, truthfully, now my mother is that she's no longer living. There is, there's something that I really value about that, is that it's connected to my mom.
Maybe more now than when you were 7.
Yeah, when I was a little kid, perhaps, or a teenager, and no one could get my name right, and maybe it wasn't quite so fun. But
yeah, and you're like, "Oh, Mom, you gave me part of your name, and now nobody gets it."
Yeah,
thanks, Mom. And
but I think the way we name characters in books is a huge thing. And some of the books that I've read that they just didn't stick with me had names that just kind of were flyaway names that didn't kind of land in your heart. And I feel like you really, even down to the name of the dog. You named the dog. Itzhak. The dog's name is Itzhak. I'm like, you named the dog in a name that made me fall for a dog. And I'm not sure if that was intentional or not, but
I fell for the dog. I pictured this dog as like a little violinist accompanying Natalie on her cello. Like, as I was like, oh, he's definitely named after Isaac Perlman. Like, why? I was like,
sure it was.
I gave the dog a backstory.
Well, if Natalie plays the cello, then yes, obviously
sense.
The dog needs to be part of her little string quartet.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me.
As a dog person, I was just like, when does the dog get a sequel? Like, is there like an Itzhak story out there? Like, everything's told from his point of view.
I read that.
Probably read it.
I was thinking that the Amelia and Fritz Straub, like that would be something they might do, is name their dog Itzhak.
Of course they would.
It worked.
But then I was wondering, I'm like, so Amelia and Fritz name their dog Itzhak, but they name their daughter Natalie, which is a beautiful name, but it's not. It doesn't sound Brooklyn. Does that?
It's not Jewish either.
It's not Jewish, and it's also like, I feel like, I don't want to say hipster, but there's like this upper class Brooklyn kind of vibe where people name their children.
Named Piper.
Yeah, and like the kids are named like Juniper and like Hunter and things like that. But
I'm just going through all the kids' names that my kids have come home with in their classes, and it's the first name, last name, boy, girl, possibly the name of I don't know, prime minister. I got nothing. They're all over the place. That's okay. My he's now going into kindergarten, but for a while he was insistent. Oh no, this is my oldest. She was insisting there was a child in her class named Kitten. And I'm like, there is no child in your class named Kitten. Nobody has gotten that crazy. You don't have Gwyneth Paltrow's kid in there. You don't have Apple in there. Turned out she just couldn't pronounce Keaton. His name was Keaton.
Oh, Keaton.
Oh,
but she was calling him Kitten the whole time.
Okay. Eventually, we're just going to be calling our children like, this is my child, Kitten. This is because Cat is a name.
That's short for Catherine or Katerina or Katrina. It isn't short for Kitten.
I'm sure there's a name that you can shorten to Kitten.
But no, you were saying that Natalie is a much more
straight down the middle name.
Straight down the middle name.
And what are they projecting for her with that, and what kind of life they want for her?
Well, so interesting question. And it might be that I imposed a little of my own desires on their naming Natalie, because what I wanted for Natalie was for her to be the heart and soul of the book. And
she is.
I kind of wanted, I didn't want her name to be too pretentious or extreme. Something. Yeah. I wanted, and I also could, I think it was true to them because I could picture them being very hipstery in certain things that they do, but when it came to naming their daughter, that they actually are pretty traditional, and they're not as I guess progressive or unusual as they'd like to think they are.
Yes, I love that.
Well, and I don't want to, again, spoiler, don't want to go there, but the naming and how we name children is another feature of your book. So that's something that for people who read the book, and I hope everybody does, they will get into the concept of how we come up with names. Okay, Jen's posing behind the book again. And there's no cobalt blue eye on that one either.
Oh,
So
gosh.
I think it's kind of a
Look
green.
at that.
Yeah,
Look
that
at
works.
that. Ooh,
Okay, we're gonna need a screenshot of that later.
I
So
know.
stay
I'm
real
like,
still.
gosh,
That's good.
I've got to do a bookstagram thing with that for you.
So Mary Dixie, I know you've written other works before, but is this your first full length debut novel?
Yes, it is. Now, I did write a book that was not published.
We all have.
We all have. Yes.
I wrote a book. It is called It Sparkles as It Burns. And that was never published, and it's still on my computer, and perhaps one day it will be. I had an agent, not the agent I have now, but and we sent it around, and people said nice things about it, but no one bought it. So
Welcome to submission hell. Sorry, that's where I live right now, waving to you from submission hell. Go on.
Well, it was very frustrating at the time. But if I'm trying to look on the bright side, I think that I did learn a lot from writing that novel. I think it's good. I'm still proud of it. But I think like writing my second novel, I already knew certain things that, could help me. And so in that way it was useful. But who knows, maybe that first one will be published at some point down the road.
Well, and I was just going to add, that's very common for people who aren't really familiar with how the submission process works. It's really common that the first book that lands to your agent gets shopped out and people say lovely things, and it just doesn't quite clear enough hurdles to be the one that is the debut. So then a lot of times then later, the second book is actually your first book. So people are like, oh, this new book, you're like, it's been on my computer for 10 years. Dust it off and then put it out there. Because once you're established and people go, oh my gosh, Mary Dixie Carter is amazing. I want everything she has. And you're like, by any chance, I have this one right here ready for you. And they're more ready, they're more likely to take a risk and go ahead and do that. And you also then have an editor who's already been working with you and maybe able to shape that book up if it isn't quite up to par yet. Doesn't mean it couldn't be, but I love it. I hope to get to read it.
I know. I was like, I would like to read that because I feel like Mary Dixie Carter, like with the photographer, you broke our brains in a good way.
Oh,
so
yeah.
thank you. And you're one of those authors that I would just be like, I want whatever book she writes. Like I want those words because
thank you.
We read a lot. I mean, because we host this show, we read a lot of books, a lot of really good books. And so we're very lucky. But every once in a while, like after a couple of weeks, something fades away. But Delta Dawn has not faded from us. And we've been talking about it. We talked about it the entire time we were reading it. And pretty much since we both stopped, which was because we read it in like record time too. It was just like, and I'm done.
Well, and I think that was one of the things is I don't know how many words it is, but it's a very fast-paced read. And I think it's because it's so intensely focused on the story. There is no padding. There are no side stories and all this stuff. It all is just driving towards the conclusion, which I found so satisfying, completely unexpected. But it just was a railroad straight there so that you didn't have all the extra fluff. And I'm not saying anything about the fluff, but there are books that you're going to have all those extra things. And then eventually you muddle towards an end. There was no muddling.
Are you looking at me, Allison?
No. But no, and your books are not the kind that I'm sitting there using it as a doorstop because it's just massive. And there are a few authors who I loved in other things, and then I read other works of theirs, and I'm going, okay, here's where the Instabuy bit me because I bought it or I checked it out from the library and then suffered through thousands of pages of just, wow, you just described all the products in the REI catalog, and now I'm going to go mountain climbing in ice Alps, and why am I reading this? And there's no abominable snowman in it. Sorry, that's an actual book. I won't say whose book, but I thought there was going to be a Yeti.
Laura.
Not nearly as many Yeti as there would be. Oh, hello, Laura. But
So,
yes, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, so I know for those of you who obviously were not privy to our pre-show conversation, Mary Dixie is on a road trip right now. Are you actively writing anything? Not at the water park, but like...
Oh, I am
your laptop in the water park?
This blissful night in a hotel by yourself. You're like, oh.
I'm working on a second novel. I cannot say that I'm working on it during this road trip, but
As you shouldn't be.
That it, like, you know, as you both know, you're sort of thinking even when you're not writing. You're kind of like, things are coming to you and you're making like connections and associations. And so who knows how it might be valuable in some way. And the other thing is, I'm stopping in a lot of bookstores, and that is really wonderful, and signing books and meeting booksellers. And so that has been a great treat.
I saw that you made it all the way to Massachusetts, didn't you?
And I did.
I'm in New Hampshire, and I was like, we have a really great independent bookstore. You should have. I was like,
you missed it.
40 minutes north. 40 minutes north.
Tell me, wait, what's your great independent bookstore? Because maybe I'll be back.
Oh, Gibson's in Concord, New Hampshire.
Oh,
which is where you're going to be doing what, Jen?
Oh, I have my book launch there on July 13th. It is sold out, but yay!
It's sold out. Oh, so no one can go. No one. Is it virtual or
it's in person?
It's in person. Wow!
It's their first in-person event in 16 months.
Oh my god! So
it's smaller but in person, and I'm just like crazy, crazy. I'm just crazy.
Congratulations!
Right now.
That's so exciting.
I was like, I can't believe I'm going to be in a bookstore with other human people and my books all at the same time. It's just.
Oh, that's thrilling. That's so cool that you get to do that in person.
It's crazy.
Well,
it's
and
crazy.
I don't know how things were for you, Mary Dixie, because when you launched, we're kind of coming out of quarantine. So when exactly did the photographer come out? Was it March or May?
It was May. It was May 25th. And we had some wonderful virtual events. And that was, I was very grateful. I mean, thank goodness that we were able to have the virtual events, but stores were not, and still I would say are not quite ready to do in-person events. But I'm hoping that I will be able to do a few, like come August, September, even though, it's a little bit after the launch, but who cares? Yeah.
I say when everything's been virtual, it just gives you the excuse to continue the launch. Because then it's like, hey, now it's the live launch. Because
exactly, it's the live launch.
Yeah, Jennifer's first book came out just before lockdown. Like she was out for about 3 seconds before the world shut down.
It was like 3 days, I think. I was like, and my book is out, everyone. Thank you.
And then she was not headline news anymore when it was lockdown for the whole world. And mine came out during the lockdown. So it was, hey, you need an author photo, and it's someone taking a picture of me on a cell phone in my front yard. Not exactly the way you want to do things. So we've all had to just kind of roll with the punches and do all that. But you get to go to all these bookstores now and meet all these booksellers, and but when you're doing a road trip and you're ending up in Wisconsin, am I the only one who's thinking American Gods through all this? Are you getting to do that tour as well and going to all the craziest things?
She said Wisconsin.
You would.
I know. I'm like, I should have thought about American Gods. That's better.
Wisconsin, most people go to cheese, but since American Gods features a road trip and ends up in some of these crazy places, I'm hoping you're seeing all those fun things. But you're in a water park. I don't remember them ever going to a water park in American Gods, so I think you win. Also,
the water park, there's many different layers and levels to the water park.
You're like,
I did get a text from my husband with a picture of the children laughing and having such a good time. So I'm happy that
you're happy. They're happy.
Yes, and so I went to my niece's wedding. That was in Columbus, Ohio.
I lived there for 12 years.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah.
I went to 2 bookstores there too.
I know, because you went to that crazy bookstore that has like 32 rooms.
Book Loft of German Village. Yes. What an amazing.
Okay, this is going on my bookstore bucket list. What is it called? Book Loft?
The Book Loft.
Book Loft of German Village.
And it's a magic land.
Oh my goodness, it's just amazing.
That was, I think, I was stalking you on Instagram, like low level, not Delta Dawn level, but like low level stalking. And that was the first picture I saw of yours that I like actively was like coming out of stalking mode and commented on. It was like, and I'm here. I love this bookstore or something stupid like that. But I was like, well, now she knows I'm stalking her. But I can say it's research because you're on the show.
Or you were just stalking the bookstore, and that's totally fine. Bookstores allow stalking.
Oh, yeah, that's a better way to frame it. Thank you, Allison. Allison is a lawyer by trade, so she's always got my back when I'm say something like,
I'm your alibi.
Yeah. Oh, she could get arrested for stalking because she keeps saying this. And she's like, you were just visiting the bookstore page repeatedly. I'm like, yes, that is what I was doing.
Yes. All of the bookstore pages, all visited for some reason by Mary Dixie Carter. It's just a weird coincidence. I don't know what's happening here.
It's weird that Jennifer has a map of Mary Dixie Carter's road trip in her house. That's weird. And a bunch of pictures of like children with bright blue eyes.
Okay, so you went to your niece's wedding in Columbus, Ohio.
Yes, and that was so much fun. My daughter was a flower girl. My son was the ring bearer.
Oh, I love it.
They were so cute, and it was a beautiful, beautiful wedding. And then I also did, as you noted, I went to the Book Loft in German Village, and I went to Prologue Bookshop. Have you ever been there?
No, where is that?
Prologue Bookshop is on. Now I can't remember.
I know because it's like Columbus. So.
The main big street that like
High Street.
Yes. So it's there, and
it might have happened after I left.
Well, yeah, I think it is relatively new, but it was very nice, and then and so onward we have this all important stop at the water park. And
was that kind of the main goal for your kids this whole time, where they're like, just get us to the water park? And you're like, look, a historic stone church. Here, children, there's this. Wait, mommy's going to a bookstore. And they're like, water park.
The water park was a surprise. And they only found out about it when we arrived at the water park.
That's amazing.
Nice. So they were like, what? Oh my God. So we were like, they didn't know where we were headed. We were going in the direction of like Minneapolis, and then we're eventually going to end up in Utah, Colorado. We may, our trip may end actually in Colorado. My nephew, who's...
That sounded ominous.
I know. I was like, Dixie, please finish that sentence. What's happening?
Okay, we have to go now, Mary Dixie. The trip is ending when we get there. After you're just like, I write like psychological thrillers. Like, the trip ends in Colorado one way or another. So continue. It's going to end happily for your family.
Yes.
Maybe in Colorado.
I'm assuming there's going to be alternate transportation back home after this. Maybe.
Yes. So
okay.
that's what I was trying to say is that so I think I told you we rented an RV. We are driving in an RV across country, but it might be that, so my nephew is actually an older nephew who is able to drive, and he may drive the RV back and we may fly back. So
wait, he'd go by himself?
He's like 22,
22-year-old guy in an RV by himself driving cross country. If there was like a security deposit, you may not be getting that back. Like,
I'm sure
that
he's
is a
lovely.
Party bus.
He's responsible young man. He's not a problem with you.
Super responsible.
Of course, but man, I don't think I was that responsible when I was 22, 23. I definitely would have been like, I have an RV. I'd probably be like, I'm living here now in Colorado in the RV.
I was already going to applaud your bravery for taking the family cross country in an RV to do all this. That's already, my hat's off. You're living the dream.
It's been really fun. And yeah, it's been a total treat. And also, so in Chicago, a lot of my husband's family lives in Chicago, in Wilmette, and and he loves going back there because he gets to see some of his friends. So we stopped in Chicago, and so there's been a really nice things about this trip. And I've gotten to visit a lot of bookstores, which has been wonderful for me because, especially as we've been discussing, I didn't get to do anything in person at the time of the launch. So now I'm getting to, to go into bookstores and sign books, and it's fun.
I love that. Oh, so it's like an unofficial book tour.
Yeah, exactly.
How long have you been on the road?
Well, I guess it's just a little over a week. It's not even that long, but it feels like it's been a while. But
it feels really long.
I almost did a spit take with my bourbon when you said that. Oh, we lost Jen. Okay, so sometimes Jen's phone overheats, and she's doing that on there because our producer is her husband, Roman, so sometimes we have like just one place. Also, they had a really bad storm. Jen, did we lose you due to storms?
I'm back.
Okay.
Flickering storm internet.
I wasn't sure if it was your phone or something weird going on, but
it's been 100 degrees for about a week, so it's just one of those things that are happening.
Oh my goodness.
Sorry.
Well,
and I've warned everybody I could disappear at any time.
I've seen people, so up in the Pacific Northwest, they're having weather that they aren't used to having. And I saw someone, I'm thinking of this because of Mary Dixie's RV, where they've pulled their RV that has air conditioning next to their house and are like piping it in with hoses, trying to get the AC from the RV.
Oh wow!
Because they don't have anything set up because the Pacific Northwest.
I would just move into the RV.
Yeah, I would probably too, but I don't know how all that works. I don't know if there's batteries or any of that. But I would just be like, "Peace out, Seattle." I would just go if I had all that. But that's crazy. But you're in a hotel with air conditioning and your cup of wine, and the kids are going to come back and they're going to be tired.
Yes,
and that's good.
Is this your first night in a hotel since you started the trip, or?
No, we had one other night in a hotel. Yes.
Was that after the wedding?
Yes. Yeah. On the wedding. Yeah.
You don't come back from a wedding and go to an RV. That just
that's
too much of a transition.
Yeah, especially when you've got like the flower girl and the ring on the fancy outfits.
I know.
Like, what do I?
That deserves a hotel room. That deserves a little bit of room service.
Yes.
Well, and I love that you waited to tell them that they were going to do a water park until after all that happened. Because if the highlight of the trip for them is I get to be in this wedding, then they're really excited. But if they're like, this wedding's fine, when I get to go down the big slide, they probably would be a little bit focused on the thing in the future.
That's a very good point. They were totally excited about the wedding. And the water park, actually it was somewhat spur of the moment for us too. I mean, we knew before the kids knew, but it was sort of like, oh, this is where we're going. And it happens to be really like practically passing by this water park that the children would be like ecstatic about. Yes. And maybe we should just go for it. So
yes.
And then, as I point out, it was also like the right timing for getting to have this conversation with you two, because otherwise I would have been doing it in the RV. And
I'm a little sad that you weren't in the RV with like your entire family in the RV, where you're just like probably still drinking wine out of a paper cup in an RV with like the whole family. I guess we couldn't be just like, so your kids had crazy alien eyes. We'd probably have to leave that part out of the story.
I don't know. They sound like they'd be old enough that they'd think that's kind of funny.
They might think so. They might think so. Oh my God. Well, it would have been a different kind of interview. It would have been a different kind of conversation if the children were jumping around in the background.
That's when I would be saying, yes, I'm sipping on iced tea. Go on.
I know. It's like, we are just having tea. Hello there. Hello there.
So that's bourbon? Is that what you two?
It's bourbon.
It is bourbon.
Just plain bourbon, nothing else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was ice.
I'm like, oh God, it sounds sad when you say it like that. Just nothing else, just like sipping.
When Jen introduced me, the romance series I write is called The Bourbon Books. So before our very first event, I actually had to try bourbon because I hadn't before. And turns out, fortunately, I do like it, or at least some of it. So it's just been a running thing that I have some. And sometimes I'll do like...
You need,
Yeah,
it's
I'll do
on brand.
You don't have to drink bourbon.
Yeah, I mean, when we had the vampire novel, I was doing Bloody Mary because that was a little too on the nose, but I did it anyway. But,
I just drank my bourbon out of goblet when we had vampire
That's
people.
True. You had a fancy red goblet. It looked enchanted.
I feel like I wish I had like an on-brand reason to be drinking bourbon other than I like tend to write dark fiction and horror, and I have like a lot of alcoholics in my book.
I was going to say, your on-brand
drink
would be laudanum tea, and then
like
you would not be a very good host.
I would be sleeping.
Hold on.
I know. When you write like a horror, there's no on-brand drink that like allows you to actually still be like functioning.
Not one you really want. Let's just go there.
Not one that I really want.
No.
So yes, we're both drinking straight bourbon.
Mm-hmm.
But
my on-brand drink
bourbon
would be Amelia drinks a lot of wine.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you're good.
Delta, actually, they both drink a lot of wine. So it's right for me. Maybe not through a paper cup, but
maybe. Well, I was going to say, we can't even see if it's a red or a white or a blush because it's in a paper cup. So.
Oh my gosh. I love
as long as you're enjoying
much.
it, that's really all that matters.
That is the key to all of this. Enjoy it.
Definitely.
And Mary Dixie, I hope you're enjoying this like wild ride you're on. Like literally and figuratively, because you're on like a wild road trip. But also, your book is the book of the summer.
Oh,
and as it should be. It's freaking great. So everybody watching this live or on the replay, like legit, honestly, read The Photographer. Please read it.
Listen to it
because that's Mary Dixie's voice. Do it. That's an order.
No.
And nobody's going to listen. Like,
I was going to say, I'm not sure.
Order.
Go for it.
Maybe.
This is so much fun. This is so much fun talking to you two.
Oh my gosh, you have been amazing. We went over, like, we try to aim for like 40 minutes, but every once in a while, like, we get authors that all of a sudden I like glance at the clock and I'm like, oh, we're taking up their entire evening. Sorry.
It was a fun conversation. It just flew by, like just chatting about anything.
Just chatting. I know. It's like we're talking about the book, but we're also talking about you. And I feel like I know for me, when I love an author, like as a person, like when I get to know them, I understand where they're writing from, and it makes the work just like even better. So thank you for telling us like your stories of the road trip and just like talking about the book and the creepy cobalt blue eyes, all of that. Like that thing from Pan's Labyrinth.
No, don't do that.
I'm like, oh, I'm going to do a Photoshop thing with that, with cobalt blue eyes. I'm going to send it to you, Mary Dixie.
Now that is crossing the line on stalking.
That is crossing. I know. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Do the Photoshop and then go ahead and just tag her.
Just tag her. Okay.
Don't
send it to her house.
No.
Okay. Like, I did an oil painting of this weird thing. Don't do that.
Don't.
Right. Okay. Okay, I got it.
Are you all right, Jen?
Yeah, I'm fine. Okay. But no, seriously. No. So Mary Dixie, thank you. I'm sorry we're leaving it on like my weird stalking note, but I feel it's on brand.
That's true.
For all of us here. Uh-oh.
Okay, so JD Estrada says, sometimes knowing the person and trying to match the messed up thing they wrote with how they are is intimidating.
Oh.
Interesting.
That is interesting. I've never thought about it like that.
Well, and I can see that because there are things that happen during certain books you've read and you go, okay, how much of this did the writer experience? And you're kind of scared to ask. And I know that sometimes when I write, people know that certain things are plucked from the pages of my own personal history. And then they will ask, did this part happen? Is this part real? And then I go, well, it's fiction. I don't have to tell you that. And I guess it depends on how well I know them before I will tell them, okay, yes, this part happened. This part, no, that's completely fictional. And I don't know that person in real life. I wish.
So people have said to me, I I don't really see you in this book at all. Like, where are you in this book?
Good. That's good.
That's when you just answer, I hide it well, don't I?
I know. You should just
blink at them a lot, make them real
meds.
uncomfortable, so they back away.
So I'm like, again, we're going over, but like, so how do you respond when they say they don't see you in the book? Like, because I know there's got to be little tidbits of you.
Well,
Everything is sprinkled in.
You know, as you know, it's like there's a tiny bit of me in each character, just like a little tiny bit.
Yes.
So, for example, Delta Dawn, everyone's like, oh my goodness, you're so far from this, you know, really crazy woman. And the one thing I've said is, well, I understand this outsider feeling. And I feel like a lot of people do understand that. I hope that people connect to Delta on that level of like, she feels like an outsider. It's extreme in her case, her feeling like an outsider. But I have felt like that at certain times in my life. And that sort of was my way into Delta, is wanting to be part of something, and like she really wants to be in the middle of it, but she always feels like she's just removed. And like there's the camera, she's looking through the camera, she's the observer, she's not really part of it. So that has been my answer when everyone is like, when anyone says, is there anything about Delta that's like you?
Or like, is there anything about you that you should tell us?
That's when you say, you are not a priest. This is not my confessional. Peace out.
Yeah. But that's a beautiful answer. And I feel like that's why I related to her. I know Allison related to her. And we were rooting for her.
Good. Oh, good. I'm glad you were rooting for her.
I know. I'm not sure we were supposed to. So
I know. Sometimes I'm like, I don't know if she's supposed to be who I'm like, God, just do it.
Well, and we read, we're in different time zones, and we read both pretty quickly, but not always at the same time. So whoever would get ahead would be like, okay, I'm on this page now, to not spoil something for the other person. So when they'd catch up, it would be like, oh, this just happened. And so Jen was texting me, somebody's like, oh, this person just found out about this thing. And I'm like, oh.
I know, I'm like, I'm at the conversation where blah. And then like sometimes it's just like a keyword, like where we'd be like monkey bars. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, yes,
it's like
monkey bars.
Mystery spot on the floor. Interesting. All those little things, and I don't want to know where you came up with some of that stuff, whether you've done any of those things. Or I'm just going to claim that you are just. Let's just say, Mary Dixie's an amazing writer and uses her imagination. Imagination, guys.
For all of it.
It's imagination.
Oh, Mary Dixie.
None of that's me.
It's good.
It might be a feeling that is a feeling of understanding who this woman is. But no, I am not.
Yeah.
Really,
you seem very stable.
Yeah, lights and architecture, and there's so much beautiful description in here about. I mean, and I say it doesn't have a lot of fluff, but there still is description. This is not a bare bones book where you're like, yep, person went over here, walked, done, over. I've read books like that too. But the appreciation of the light and the architecture and the interior design. So you can claim all those things. Those are safe. Yeah. No one's going to lock you up for that.
Good. Yes, I should more aggressively claim those things.
Claim those things. Claim like her, she has an incredible amount of love in her too. So she's a great character. She's a really, really like phenomenal character. And I hope we get to see her at some point on like a screen, big or small.
So I will tell you, I know that we're
no, it's okay.
Finishing up, but it is being made into a television series. It's being adapted into a television series, and I can't tell you the details.
This is always what happens.
Been announced.
You can't tell us the network or
I can't
the
tell you.
So
So
if we just shouted at you, can you just look in the camera?
If I do this for Amazon Prime.
I know. Like
I hope it's announced soon. I really do. But it's being developed as we speak, and I'm very excited about the
things
people
you
who are
know.
working on it. I'm very, very excited, and so I think I have the utmost confidence that it's going to be really good based on who's doing it. So
they better do it justice.
What?
They better do it justice, or Jen and I will be mad. But that's fine.
We're
thank you for saying that.
We're obsessed. We are Delta Dawn style obsessed with your book.
Good.
So
Yay.
love it. So congratulations. I cannot wait to hear details when they're public. And just know that I'll be watching. Allison will be watching. That sounds creepy.
Yes,
I crossed the line again, Allison.
Yes, you did.
To I'll be watching. Reel it back. I'll be watching your show when it's out. See, that's better.
We'll be tuning in. Put it that way.
Tuning in.
I know that's like a 1970s way to put it, but I think most people still know what that means. My kids wouldn't. They're like, Roku button. They don't know what tuning means.
All right, kiddos. We've got to call this a night. Mary Dixie's got to finish her cup of wine in peace before everybody comes back to her hotel room. Thank you, Mary Dixie, for being here. Thank you, Allison, obviously, for everything. Reading, keeping me sane, being my co-host. Thank you to Roman Seriton, our producer. Thank you to Pam Stack, our executive producer. Thank you to everybody at the Global Authors on the Air Radio Network. For those of you who didn't tune in last week, Vox Vomitus is the #1 video podcast on the Global Authors on the Air Radio Network. So we are still celebrating that. Next week is our 1-year anniversary show. So we have no guest, but Allison and I will be drinking, answering questions, and reminiscing and talking about what we're working on now. And then the week after that, we have Joe Lansdale, which is a crazy big name. So very excited. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we will see you next week.